Good evening. Thanks for joining our virtual presentation. This event is part of the Frank Islam Athenaeum Symposium series. I'm Dr. Fiona Glade, Dean of Communication Studies, English Language for Academic Purposes, and Linguistics. On behalf of Germantown Campus Vice President and Provost Margaret Latimer, and as the curator for the Athenaeum series, I'm honored to welcome you all. I begin with a grateful acknowledgement of the Native peoples on whose ancestral homelands Montgomery College sits, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here in Montgomery County still today. This Distinguished Speakers series is made possible through a most generous gift from philanthropist and civic leader, Mr. Frank Islam. A powerful philosophy created by Mr. Islam drives the Athenaeum Symposia. He says, if you conceive it, you believe it, you can achieve it. You can find more info about our program, view recordings of previous speakers by visiting the Montgomery County Athenaeum website. Our presentation today is being recorded and will be available at that website in a couple of weeks. This year, our speakers have all explored the very timely theme of advocacy, activism, and public engagement. As the Athenaeum celebrates Black History Month, today's presentation asks us to consider how we honor and are grateful to those who came before. Before we go on, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the work of a few really great MC folks who've contributed to making this event happen. Mr. Stan Jones, our MCTV technical producer, and our Athenaeum fellows from Germantown campus, Professor Amanda Miller and Professor Katima Lee. And now I'm happy to introduce one of MC's finest, sophomore Soha Mustafa. I'll use her own words. Soha says, I love reading, I like writing. I don't know if it's something I'm good at or bad at. All I know is that reading and writing are pure magic, intimately connecting us with people, places, and ideas, inviting each reader to dig deeper within themselves while sharing a mystery. And with that, I pass the mic to the very talented Soha, who will offer the introduction to our distinguished guest, Ross Gay.
Today, we are very fortunate to have Ross Gay here with us, who will deliver a presentation about the ways we are made by who came before us, and that one of the practices of gratitude is attending to those ones, honoring them, saying their names as if we know them, and learning how they did what they did. In Gay's recent work, Through Joyous Musings, the reader experiences the delight of eating figs from a tree in Philadelphia, or the wondrous adventure of a tomato on a plane. Ross Gay is the author of 4 books of poetry, Against Which, Bringing the Shovel Down, Beholding, and the Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, winner of the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. His new book-length poem, Beholding, was released from the University of Pittsburgh Press in September 2020. His collection of essays, The Book of Delights, was released by the Algonquin Books in 2019. Ross is a founding board member of the Bloomington Community Orchard, a nonprofit, a free fruit for all food justice and joy project. He also works on the Tenderness Project with Shiloh Lawson in Essence, London. He has received fellowships from the Kawakanem, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and the Guggenheim Foundation. Ross teaches at Indiana University. Fellow students of the Montgomery College community, please welcome Ross Gay.
Thank you, Soha. It was so good to hear those words, also your words and that kind introduction, and also the idea of like mystery and intimacy and writing and reading and when you, that like not knowing whether you're good at it or not, that I feel like that all the time. I just want to say that. I feel always like as I'm writing, I wonder if this is any good or not. And that's part of the pleasure to me of trying something out and then not actually being like, is this good or not, but actually being like, is it beautiful or not? Does it mean something to me or not? Which, the good and the beautiful are often at odds, actually. They don't always sync up. But the true, that's this other thing, the thing that I'm hoping for, the true and the beautiful. I think those are. So anyway, I'm so glad to be here with you all. Thank you so much for the invitation. I feel very lucky to join you all. I'm going to read two things, and I'm sort of thinking about this theme of gratitude and who makes what possible and all of that. And this first essay is actually the concluding essay from this book that I've been working on for the last little while, and it's called Inciting Joy. That's the name of the book, Inciting Joy. And this concluding essay is called Joy. Well, I just realized, I just turned this book, but I haven't yet titled this essay. But the subtitle is Joy and Gratitude. So I'll tell you that. And there's an epigraph, and an epigraph is kind of like a little pre-quote that happens at the beginning of the essay. And the quote is from the poet Cornelius Eady, and it's from his poem called Gratitude. And the epigraph is, I am a brick in a house that is being built around your house. Given that I have already blathered on enough about gratitude elsewhere, truth be told, in my book, by which I mean in my opinion, there is no blathering on enough about gratitude. The real thing, I mean. There is no enough to gratitude. And it does not in the least seem an ill-conceived exercise, devotion, project, life, to do nothing other than list or catalog said gratitudes. Perhaps starting with the interior of what before your devotional, your practice, you considered your body. But now, because you are thanking the trillion or so microbes in your gut and creepy crawling your skin and slathering lasciviously through your mouth and eyeballs and nostrils, critters, some of whom, if they get ill and die off, you will be a goner in a heartbeat. Invisible EMTs, you might start there. That is a trillion gratitudes. That ought to keep you busy. Or, my God, who shouts out skin anymore? I don't mean the luster or hue, all of which are gobsmackingly stunning, and that those hues change most often in relation to the sun, that our skin is one of the many evidences that we are directly related to the sunflower and other heliotropic critters. Gobsmack, I mean the simple fact of our skin, an envelope or satchel or sack to hold our guts in, and how it changes and becomes an archive or a repository of those changes. Mine variously stretch marked, pocked, dimpled, flappy, hairy, scarred, grooved, smooth, sagging, of different hues, and as yet dear, unacknowledged, accomplished. Hard sentence to say, hard phrase to say. And as yet dear, unacknowledged accomplice, holding my guts in. The eyelash, good Lord, high five to that. Saliva, nose hairs, unbecoming though we often say you are, you do your job, whatever it is. Thank you. Ear hairs too, more prominent by the day, I notice. And this knee like a pepper grinder, but still bending, still not chalk. We can carry on with the body like this. Inside the body, even if it is broken beyond repair, probably, though not necessarily, there's a rectum and an anus to let the shit out, which either way constitutes a gratitude. There is tubing in there we do not know and maybe do not want to, but that might like to know we are grateful. Thank you, stank tubing in there. This is just the body we're talking about. And we haven't even begun. I mean, mammals have hair, which though the source of much consternation and prohibition and hand-wringing is actually an astonishment. And I've been the lucky recipient of so much simple creaturely tending because of it. Dozing off in between the legs of some dear braider, tugging the strands tight. Teeth, the gums that hold them in your mouth, you have to be kidding me. Fingernails. If you got a nose, and even if that nose is perpetually stuffed or busted or by a rogue elbow, it might one day, who knows, drag you to a lily that smells precisely like your mother who is getting old. And if you got toes, whether crooked or not. We can go out from the body gradually like this to the furthest reaches of our imaginations, gratituding the world, garlanding the world with gratitude, an hour a day a week, a year. We could do it always and forever and never arrive at the last gratitude. We could never do it enough. Let's try. Let's start today, shall we? I want to keep this one quick. Let me just tell you, that was a long parenthetical. I said, given that I have already blathered on enough about gratitude elsewhere than everything I just read, I want to keep this one quick. Periodically, I will catch wind of a response to my work, though I do everything I can to avoid being downwind of such things. Social media, they call it, though from what I hear, it seems sometimes antisocial and carcinogenic. That is something along the lines of, as Hanif Abdurraqib has written beautifully about, a white woman at a reading of mine saying something like, how can a Black man write about flowers at a time like this? To which I know I should just wave my hand in front of my face like there's a gnat buzzing around, or pretend the gnat isn't there. But my first response is actually something along the lines of, you need to grow up if you think it's not always a time like this. And you need to shut up if you think you know what this Black man or anyone ought to be writing right now. Grow up and shut up. But I try to know better than to spend time on that question, which is no question at all. It's a shackle. It's a cell. But there's other one I do want to spend a little more time with. Someone mentioned to me some post or tweet or whatever that was something along the lines of, quote, any grown Black poet talking about gratitude. I forget the rest, but it was approximately, must have his pea-brained head up his own nasty ass. Somehow I gathered this commentator was Black and they were talking about me. My first response was kind of self-protective or defensive. It hurt my feelings, I'm saying, though I know I shouldn't say so. I was like, hand on chest, ouch, my heart. And my second response, sympathetic to the heartbreak and rage from which the tweet was launched, was the same, ouch, my heart. Anyway, it is to ouch my heart that this brief meditation, and probably too this whole book, is addressed. It is true that we are often implored or compelled, especially by institutions that have the power to kill us, by which I mean the power to withhold the resources for life and the power to exterminate us, to be grateful. The very most obvious is something along the lines of, you should just be grateful you have a job here. Or you should just be grateful we let you in. Or you should just be grateful you have any health insurance. Or you should just be grateful you have a roof over your head at all. Or you should just be grateful the incinerator is not next door. Or you should just be grateful it only definitively causes 3 types of cancer. Or you should just be grateful we didn't log all the trees. Or you should just be grateful it seems to move out of the soil in a decade or 2. Or you should just be grateful we put up a sound barrier on the highway we ran through your neighborhood. Or you should just be grateful they aren't all extinct. Or you should just be grateful we didn't take everything. Or you should just be grateful they make inhalers for that. Or you should just be grateful there's a shop. Or you should just be grateful we're not suing you. Or you should just be grateful it wasn't worse. Or you should just be grateful we let you sleep under that bridge. Or you should just be grateful we have a treatment for those comorbidities we gave you. Or you should just be grateful that after we occupied your territory, we let you stay living there on the outskirts. Or you should just be grateful that after we took your neighborhood, we still let you shop at Whole Foods. Or you should just be grateful we haven't yet patented that seed. Or you should just be grateful that we're delivering bottled water. Or you should just be grateful for the test kit. Or you should just be grateful for the gas mask. Or you should just be grateful for the boats we've left on the shore. You'll find in each one a small compartment with Band-Aids, bootstraps, antibiotics, water purifier, sunscreen, GPS, slicker, 1 spare telescoping oar, a coupon book, Ray-Bans, a fishing pole and camp stove, a boat repair kit, Leatherman and tar paper, Bill Gates' autobiography, the transcripts of all 800,000 TED Talks, a subscription to Forbes, a Tesla rechargeable reading light biometric monitor to keep you safe. We'll keep an eye on you. A Nike visor to the brim of which you can attach the aforementioned, and vitamin C tablets, the stores of which we will replenish monthly by helicopter. Just use the QR code. We won't charge you much. We'll keep a tab, for which, in case you forgot, you should just shut your mouth and be grateful. And though today, riding my bike down a narrow one-way road and seeing the oncoming very big American truck, maroon, and no shoulder or place for me to go, I thought, God, I hope this dude doesn't plow into me by murder or madness or accident, having for a time to time, wanted to drive my own car into things, usually other cars or trees or telephone poles or walls head on, not to hurt anyone or anything, but to quiet my hurting mind. I breathed an actual sigh of relief as the big extended mirror passed me by, the whoosh of which by my face flushed from my mouth the word blessed, the way my friend Don used to say it, bringing forth with his big, sad smile the church ladies as he did so, blessed, or have a blessed day. Like my Nana says, all right, baby, be blessed now. It strikes me as an ancestral ethos. Hang on now. I was gonna say that I felt blessed that dude didn't plow me, dude as human force that could kill me, dude as state or multinational corporation that would gladly plow through me for shareholder satisfaction. But also that I don't know if I'd call that blessedness gratitude, especially considering my own previously potentially collaterally homicidal ideation. But I think I probably would call it grace. Every moment of escape. How many actual millions of them do we carry in the suitcases of our bodies? No, let's say the trees of our bodies, because grace shares a root. You see it there, don't you? With gratitude. Amazing. Yes, my favorite concert movie of all time is neither Dave Chappelle's Block Party nor Richard Pryor Live on the Sunset Strip. It is Amazing Grace, the documentary of the making of Aretha Franklin's record of the same name. The movie and record, made incidentally within months of Nina Simone's live album, Emergency Ward, features selections from Franklin's live performances, January 13th and 14th, 1972, at the New Temple Missionary Baptist Church in LA, supported by the Southern California Community Choir under the direction of Alexander Hamilton. I want to point you to the moment in the film. So, you know, like in another world, I'm playing the movie as this is going on. And so I'm going to ask you all to go, if you haven't seen this movie yet, go watch it. I want to point you to the moment in the film at the conclusion of the first night's performance, about 2/3 of the way through their rendition of Amazing Grace, the song Amazing Grace, during which the Reverend James Cleveland, convener, vocalist, and pianist, is spotted away from the choir and his piano with his head in his hands. He's crying, falling apart. And the choir, just like the audience, is moved every which way. And after Aretha has a quick rest, sits and wipes her face some, and the Reverend recovers and puts his jacket back on and returns to his post, guiding the choir in their sturdy, buffeted, shouted harmonies, which too draw Aretha to her feet and back to the podium, safe, safe, safe. So safe, she responds. So safe with Jesus, Aretha sings. And it's grace. You might know the song. You might sing along. That would lead me home. And in a miracle of footage, as though to anticipate our reflex to designate Franklin a singular talent, a distinguished genius, a solitary voice, as though to anticipate our desire to never mind the choir, and never mind the organist in the band, and never mind the Reverend James Cleveland, and never mind the parishioners, and never mind the goddamn lyrics to the song, and never mind all her teachers and guides and elders, never mind who came before her, or swept the stage, or fixed the lights, or tuned the piano, or made the tea, or cooked or grew the food that fed her mother's mother. Never mind her mother's mother. never mind all by which she is even standing before us in the first place. Grace, through her sung as it had never been sung before. Amazing. We behold that the Reverend James Cleveland, who has come to stand next to her at the podium, has his hand wrapped in the back of her dress, as though he is holding her up. I mean, he is holding her up. And Aretha Franklin is holding his hand, holding her up as though she is holding him up. I mean, she is holding him up. They are holding each other up. The grace of footage lets us behold how they be holding each other up, how we be holding each other up. And as she unfurls another melismatic amazing, his mouth moves with hers. And though they aren't indistinguishable from one another, neither are they separate. And that miracle of footage, that glimpse of microcosmic holding, points to the macrocosmic holding, of which, if it isn't yet plain, I beg you to listen again, watch again. Miss Aretha Franklin's voice is simply the beautiful evidence. Or another way to put it, Aretha Franklin's voice, quiet as it's kept, my favorite song on that album, the one that's on repeat in my head as I compose this, one of the songs I hope might accompany me as I walk out of this still pretty bouncy sack of bones, is Holy, Holy, the cover of the Marvin Gaye song. Aretha Franklin's voice is not only singing about, but as evidence of grace, which is defined as, quote, God's unmerited favor, love, or help. What I called a macrocosmic holding, but what also might be called gift. Although I know the dangers of reading the comments, not so much on these YouTube clips. And one of the more frequent and astute observations there is that Aretha Franklin was touched or carrying forth or channeling or the conveyor to us of a gift that, though it came through her, was not exactly hers. None of which, for the record, diminishes the labor, the practice, the time she spent. Let's not say spent. Let's say devoted. Let's say gave. Cultivating that gift. Or a better way to say it, maybe is being grateful for that gift. Though there is certainly a discourse of diminishment, particularly among the gifting of Black people, that would make it seem so. You know, white people work hard, Black people are gifted. But ouch, my heart, I only barely want to acknowledge that because we're not talking about them. Them is the same them telling us what we ought to write, what we ought to think about, what we ought to love. Them is the same them telling us we ought to be grateful they let us live. We're talking about Aretha Franklin, whose gifts or gratitude remind us of giftedness, remind us of gift. And gifts, as the writer Robin Wall Kimmerer writes in Braiding Sweetgrass, quote, from the earth or from each other, establish a particular relationship, an obligation of sorts to give, to receive, and to reciprocate, end quote. Kimmerer recounts how as a child she would run through the fields when the wild strawberries would come on, getting on her stomach or back to receive the gift of the fruit, which came only for a short time, and which gave of themselves so she might have some sweetness. Or, she says, still learning patience and sometimes gobbling up the still white berries, sourness. She was learning from the strawberries of the earth and all bounty that comes from the earth, which is to say, isn't it, ouch my heart, everything true is a gift, which is a radically different notion than the one we are just barely surviving. I'm talking about capitalism and settler colonialism and all the entangled brutalities and lies we are told the truth and that we ought to be grateful for them. Kimmerer writes, quote, the fundamental nature of gifts is that they move and their value increases with their passage. The fields made a gift of strawberries to us and we made a gift of them to our Father. The more something is shared, the greater its value becomes. This is hard to grasp for societies steeped in notions of private property, where others, we, are, by definition, excluded from sharing, end quote. And a few paragraphs later, she writes, quote, "The essence of the gift is that it creates a set of relationships. The currency of a gift economy is, at its root, reciprocity," end quote. But the currency of the brutal economy is the opposite of reciprocity: theft, hoarding, dispossession, alienation. The brutal economy is a system of lies, a net of stories, a noose of agreements that turns whoever owns the most or signs the checks or holds the keys or wields the gavel or stamps the papers or has a spaceship, unless you're Sun Ra, into a god, to whom, at least that's what they think, because it's true, they are killing us. We should be grateful. In the theft economy, the gods might not give you a visa. They might put you in the street. They will for sure bust up your union. They can take you in if they want. They're putting sludge in the river. They're putting a pipeline through as we speak. They're doing everything they can to keep burning up the world. Given this, ouch, my heart, I understand the impulse directed a tad meanly at me, gotta say, but nah, we're cool. To be like, fuck gratitude, or to be like any grown Black poet talking about gratitude, etc. I get it. I mean, I really get it. Let's take one horrible, though superb example. Have you read Chris Manjapra's March 29th, 2018 article in The Guardian? In it, he tells how reparations were paid to England's white former enslavers and their descendants until about 2015, which is so absurd that it is almost impossible to hear. So I will say it again, a touch differently. When England unenslaved their enslaved population, it collected a tax from its citizens to pay white reparations to the former enslavers and their descendants, a tax which would have been paid, yep, also by formerly enslaved people and their descendants. Which means, I'm just wanting to be clear here, that the ancestors of the enslaved were paying the ancestors of the enslavers for letting their people go until 2015. Emancipation, Jubilee. As nuts as it sounds, I know you know, it's a dime a dozen. We will take your land, we will take your people, we will take your language, we will take your livelihood, we will take your everything. But yay, for those who slip through, here's your life, what's left of it. You won't recognize it, but you'll have to pay us for it anyway. And how about you show a little goddamn gratitude? It's called being grateful at the barrel of a gun, which you can't be. I mean, there is a monk out there who can be, but I ain't that monk. Nor should you be. Oh, my heart. That's not gratitude. That's being extorted. I was lucky enough to meet the winners of the 2014 Food Sovereignty Prize at Black Oak Center, a land project outside of Kankakee, Illinois. One of the winners was from the Dessalines Brigade, a peasant farmer as she called herself, and as one of the recipients of the 2014 Food Sovereignty Prize, she was touring farming projects around the United States. I got there a few minutes late and joined the just departing tour of the property, the fields and beehives and herbal apothecary. There were about 15 of us, and eventually we arrived, after walking through a greenhouse, at a star-shaped plot planted in strawberries, herbs, and more. Our host, Dr. Jafunsa Carter-Wright, who was, incidentally, the poet Gwendolyn Brooks's primary care physician, blessed, grace, told us we were at the ancestral garden, where all the visitors come when they arrive. It is here, Dr. J said, that we lay down the sorrows of slavery and colonialism and imperialism. It is here, she said, that together we lay our sorrows down, which we did, holding the hands of who was next to us. She didn't tell us this is one of the definitions of joy, holding each other through the sorrow, because she didn't have to. The strawberries and the lemon balm did that. We retreated into the kitchen where we ate from an excellent potluck These places, Black Oak, Soulfire Farm, the Bloomington Community Orchard, etc., as a rule, do the most badass potlucks. I remember soup and homemade bread and beans, and as always, noting that the squash, potatoes, and kale came from the field. The thyme and rosemary, you saw them on your way in, right over there. Tony brought the green bean, and Gilbert brought the kombucha. It's called grace. It means gratitude. It's just how we do. It was chilly. We were huddled a little closer than if it wasn't. And for those of us not from the upper Midwest, it was freezing, as our Brazilian and Haitian friends noted a few times. But we just huddled and laughed and kept our mugs full of tea, lemon balm from the ancestral garden. Tiana brought the mint. We asked questions and told stories and took notes sometimes, and sometimes not. The light changed in the room, the shadows on our faces. We spoke a few different languages: Creole, Portuguese, English, Spanish, French. So we were in one of those beautiful circuits of translation, relying on each other to understand each other, as always, again. Oh, my heart. It was during this conversation that I learned why the Dessalines Brigade was awarded the Food Sovereignty Prize. Shortly after the 2012 earthquake in Haiti, Monsanto, seeing in this disaster a new market for their genetically modified seed and all the toxic accompaniments it requires, delivered tons and tons of seed to Haiti. It surely to some looked like a gesture of benevolence, largesse, the same way so much so-called aid does. But as the Dessalines Brigade knew, it actually meant being entrapped by a multinational corporation whose product, for instance, Roundup Ready corn, requires, get ready for it, Roundup or glyphosate, a toxin that is so ubiquitous that it's not only in the millions of acres worldwide that it's sprayed on, it's likely in your drinking water. It's probably in your cells. It's definitely in breast milk. The Dessalines Brigade knew that the introduction of this genetically modified seed would mean forsaking the hundreds and hundreds of years of wisdom and care and love that is carried in the vault of their own seed, their own practices, which Monsanto was hoping to replace, erase, with practices of their own. And by erasing, we're talking about seed and practice, enslaving. Actually, I mean re-enslaving, which the Dessalines Brigade saw coming from miles away, like the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And so, in what to many seemed an act of wild ingratitude, from inside the rubble and the need, it was a party, a celebration. They burnt Monsanto's seed. I think I do not need to tell you, oh, my heart, that refusal, that fire, that party is what I mean by gratitude. Gratitude to who brought the seed, often under great duress for us. Gratitude to the land, the earth, for giving and receiving the seed, often under great duress for us. Gratitude to the water and the sun and the soil. What is the soil other than the million gratitudes? Who would germinate the seed for us? Gratitude to the pollinators who would bring forth the fruit, or the wind who would shiver the tassel for us. Gratitude to the trees who housed the creatures, made the shade, held the soil together, died and joined their bodies to the trillion gratitudes from which the seeds would grow again and again for us. Their refusal of the fake gift is a radical joining. And that joining, oh my heart, is gratitude. Shortly before this food sovereignty folks had to be on their way to the next stop, as we were finishing our tea and dessert, I will never forget it as long as I live, a young Black farmer asked the Haitian farmer from the Dessalines Brigade, who, remember, they burnt the seeds, what they do when it's difficult, when times were hard and it was a challenge to keep going. She half smiled and looked up into the corner, shivering there in her borrowed ski cap beneath her hoodie, pulled up. Then she laughed, looked the young farmer in the eye, and she said, oh, my heart, we sing. That song, to, oh, my heart, through the difficulty, which is sometimes profound, inconceivable, as far as I'm concerned, is gratitude. It was taught to us, given to us, grace, amazing, by our ancestors, some of whom survived the unsurvivable, endured the unendurable, and some of whom did not. That song was given to us by our ancestors, those who lived and those who died, who they said were property, and whose life was a refusal, a disowning, an insurgent gratitude. Our fleeting bodies owe my heart the flowers of that insurgence, and we replant that insurgent gratitude by saving the seeds we have been given and giving them away. I think that's what the writer Toy Derricott means in her poem, The Telecycle, when she says that joy is an act of resistance. The luminous mycelial tethers between us, our fundamental connection to one another, the raft through the sorrow, the holding through the grief joy is, reminds us again and again that we belong not to an institution or a party or a state or a market, but to each other, needfully so, which we must practice and study and sing and story and dream and celebrate, belonging to each other as though our lives depended on it. And when we sing like that, oh, my heart, what then? Oh, my heart, it's a real question. My heart, what then? And I'm going to read you this poem, and I think that'll be a nice landing spot. That essay is actually, I realized it's called Oh, My Heart. Yeah. This poem is called, keep with the theme, it's called Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. And it's the title poem from this book called Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. And I just want you to say, Soha mentioned that I have been for a while involved with a project called the Bloomington Community Orchard, which is a free fruit for all community project. And it's been going on now for, we're coming up on 11 years. And it was started by a woman named Amy Countryman, who was actually an undergraduate student. And for her thesis project, she wanted to do some kind of research about food security and stuff, like the availability of food to people in the town. And one of the things she's very interested in is trees and stuff. So she did a survey of the urban forest. That means all the trees that are kind of managed by the city. And she found that very few of those trees made any food. In our area, probably a handful of those trees make things like persimmons, which are delicious, but tiny amount of them. And black walnuts, maybe, if they consider that a food tree. It's good food, but you can't get into it unless you're a squirrel. So it was less than 2% of the urban canopy made any food. So she thought, well, yeah, it makes sense that maybe something like a community orchard, a publicly run community orchard, could be a kind of intervention, a way for people to at least get together and think about how we might grow food and take care of each other. It's been one of the most important projects I've ever worked on in my life. And maybe during the Q&A, I'll have a chance to talk about it a little bit more, but it's this place where it's only an acre. It's a small place. I mean, it's planted fairly densely. So there's probably about 80 fruit trees, but it's the product of that orchard is not the fruit. The product is actually the people coming together to work together and to learn how to care for each other. That's the product of that orchard. And it's amazing now that there is fruit. 10 years later, there is fruit, and we're learning better how to care for the trees, and it's all organic and all that stuff. But it's just been one of the most important kind of projects that I've worked on in my life. And it shows up in this poem a little bit. So I wanted to tell you all that so you know that when I'm talking about turning compost, it's at that project. Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. Friends, will you bear with me today? For I have awakened from a dream in which a robin made with its shabby wings a kind of veil, behind which it shimmied and stomped something from the south of Spain, its breast aflare, looking me dead in the eye from the branch that grew into my window, coochie-cooing my chin. The bird was shuffling its little talons left and then right, while the leaves bristled against the plaster wall, two of them drifting onto my blanket, while the bird opened and closed its wings like a matador, giving up on murder. Jutting its beak, turning a circle, and flashing again the ruddy bombast of its breast, by which I knew upon waking this bird was telling me in no uncertain terms to bellow forth the tubas and sousaphones, the whole rusty brass band of gratitude not quite dormant in my belly. It said so in a human voice, bellow forth. And who among us could ignore such odd and precise counsel? Hear ye, I am here to holler that I have hauled tons, by which I don't mean lots, I mean tons of cow shit, and stood ankle deep in swales of maggots swirling the spent beer grains the brewery man was good enough to dump off, holding his nose, for they smell very bad, but make the compost writhe giddy and lick its lips, twirling dung with my pitchfork again and again with hundreds and hundreds of other people. We dreamt an orchard this way, furrowing our brows and hauling our wheelbarrows and sweating through our shirts. And less than a year later, there was a party at which trees were sunk into the well-fed earth, one of which, a Liberty apple, after being watered in, was tamped by a baby, barefoot, with a bow hanging in her hair, biting her lip in her joyous work. And friends, this is the realest place I know. It makes me squirm like a worm. I am so grateful. You could ride your bike there, or roller skate, or catch the bus. There's a fence and a gate twisted by hand. There is a fig tree taller than you in Indiana. It will make you gasp. It might make you want to stay alive even. Thank you. And thank you for not taking my power when the engine of his mind dragged him to swig fistfuls of Xanax and a bottle or two of booze. And thank you for taking my father a few years after his own father went down. Thank you, Mercy. Mercy, thank you for not smoking meth with your mother. Oh, thank you. Thank you for leaving and for coming back. And thank you for what inside my friend's love bursts like a throng of roadside goldenrod, gleaming into the world, likely hauling a shovel with her like one named Aralee ought, with hands big as a horse's, and who, like one named Aralee ought, will laugh time to time till the juice runs from her nose. Oh, thank you for the way a small thing's wail makes the milk, or what once was milk, in us gather into horses huckle-buckling across a field. And thank you, friends, when last spring the hyacinth bells rang and the crocuses flaunted their upturned skirts. In a quiet roved the beehive, which when I entered were snugged 2 or 3 dead fist-sized clutches of bees between the frames, almost clinging to one another. This one's tiny head pushed into another's tiny wing, one's forelegs resting on another's face, the translucent paper of their wings fluttering beneath my breath. And when a few dropped to the frames beneath, honey. And after falling down to cry, everything's glacial shine. And thank you too. And thanks for the corduroy couch I have put you on. Put your feet up. Here's a light blanket, a pillow, dear ones, for I think this is going to be long. I can't stop my gratitude, which includes, dear reader, you for staying here with me, for moving your lips just so as I speak. Here is a cup of tea. I have spooned some honey into it. And thank you, the tiny bee's shadow, perusing these words as I write them. And the way my love talks quietly when in the hive. So quietly, in fact, you cannot hear her, but only notice barely her lips moving in conversation. Thank you, what does not scare her in me but makes her reach my way. Thank you, the love she is, which hurts sometimes. And the time she misremembered elephants in one of my poems, which, oh, here they come. Garlanded with morning glory and wisteria blooms, trombones all the way down to the river. Thank you, the quiet in which the river bends around the elephant's solemn trunk, polishing stones, floating on its gentle back, the flock of geese flying overhead. And to the quick and gentle flocking of men, to the old lady falling down on the corner of Fairmount and 18th, holding patiently with the softest parts of their hands her cane and purple hat, gathering for her the contents of her purse and touching her shoulder and elbow. And thank you too, the cockeyed basketball court on which in a half court 3-on-3, we old heads made of some runny nose kids a shambles. And the 61-year-old, after flipping a reverse layup off a backdoor cut from my no-look pass, ripped off his shirt and threw punches at the gods and hollered at the kids to admire the pacemaker's scar grinning across his chest. Thank you, the glad accordion's wheeze in the chest. Thank you, the bagpipes. Thank you to the woman barefoot in a gaudy dress for stopping her car in the middle of the road and the tractor trailer behind her and the van behind it, whisking a turtle off the road. Thank you, God of gaudy. Thank you, paisley panties. Thank you, the organ up my dress. Thank you, the sheer dress you wore kneeling in my dream at the creek's edge and the light swimming through it. The coy kissing halos into the glassy air, the room in my mind with the blinds drawn where we nearly injure each other, crawling into the shawl of each other's body. Thank you, when I just say it plain, we fuck each other dumb. And again, you, for the true kindness it has been for you to remain awake with me like this, nodding time to time and making that noise, which I take to mean yes, or I understand. This is an interesting thing to do on Zoom, you know, because I'm used to being in rooms, but it still is happening. Yes, or I understand, or please go on, but not too long. Or why are you spitting so much? Or easy, tiger, hands to yourself. I'm excitable. I'm sorry. I'm grateful. I just want us to be friends now, forever. Take this bowl of blackberries from the garden. The sun has made them warm. I picked them just for you. I promise I will stay on my side of the couch. And thank you, the baggie of dreadlocks I found in a drawer while washing and folding the clothes of our murdered friend. The photo in which his arm slung around the sign to the Trail of Silences. Thank you, the way before he died, he held his hands open to us. For coming back in a waft of incense, or in the shape of a boy in another city looking from between his mother's legs, or disappearing into the stacks after brushing by, for moseying back in dreams where, seeing us lost and scared, he put his hand on our shoulders and he pointed us to the temple across town. And thank you to the man all night long, posing a mist on his early bloomed peach tree so that the hard frost not waste the crop. The ice in his beard and the ghosts lifting from him when the warming sun told him, sleep now. Thank you, the ancestor who loved you before she knew you by smuggling seeds into her braid for the long journey, who loved you before he knew you by putting a walnut tree in the ground, who loved you before she knew you by not slaughtering the land. Thank you, who did not bulldoze the ancient grove of dates and olives, who sailed his keys into the ocean and walked softly home, who did not fire, who did not plunge the head into the toilet, who said, stop, don't do that, who lifted some broken someone up, who volunteered the way a plant birth of the reseeding plant is called a volunteer, like the plum tree that marched beside the raised bed in my garden, like the arugula that marched itself between the blueberries, nary a bayonet, nary an army, nary a nation, which usage of the word volunteer, familiar to gardeners, the wide world, made my pal shout, oh, and dance and plunge his knuckles into the lush soil before gobbling 2 strawberries and digging his song from his guitar made of wood from a tree someone maybe planted. Thank you. And thank you, Zinnia and Gooseberry, Rebecca and Pawpaw, Ashmead's Kernel, Coxcomb and Scarlet Runner, Feverfew and Lemon Balm. Thank you, Knitbone and Sweetgrass and Sunchoke and False Indigo, whose petals stammered apart by bumblebees. Good Lord, give me a minute. And Moonglow and Catkin and Crookneck and Painted Tongue and Seed Pod and Johnny Jump Up. Thank you, what in us brackets glad, what glad brackets us. And thank you to this knuckle-headed heart, this pelican heart, this gap-toothed heart flinging open its gaudy maw to the sky. Oh, clumsy, oh, bumblefucked, oh, giddy, oh, dumbstruck, oh, rickshaw, oh, goat, twisting its head at me from my peach tree's highest branch, balanced impossibly, gobbling the last fruit, its tongue working like an engine, a lone sweet drop tumbling by some miracle into my mouth like the smell of someone I have loved. Heart like an elephant screaming at the bones of its dead. Heart like the lady on the bus dressed head to toe in gold, the sun shivering her shiny boots, singing Erykah Badu to herself, leaning her head against the window. And thank you the way my father one time came back in a dream by plucking the 2 cables beneath my chin like a bass fiddle strings and played me until I woke singing, no kidding. I was singing and smiling. Thank you, thank you. Stumbling into the garden where the Juneberry's flowers had burst open like the bells of French horns. The lily my mom and I planted, it oozed into the air. The bazillion ants labored in their earthen workshops below. The collard greens waved in the wind like the sails of ships, and the wasps swam in the mint bloom's viscous swill. And you, again, you, dear friend, for hanging tight, for staying with me like this. I know I can be long-winded sometimes. I want so badly to rub the sponge of gratitude over everything, including you, which, yes, is awkward. The soap and suds running down behind your eyeglasses. Soon it will be over, which is precisely what the child in my dream said, holding my hand, pointing at the roiling sea, and the sky hurling our way like so many buffalo, who said, it's much worse than we think, and sooner. To whom I said, no duh, child of my dreams. What do you think this singing and shuddering is? This screaming and reaching and dancing and crying is, other than loving what every second goes away? Goodbye, I mean to say, and thank you every day. Thank you.
Wow, Ross. Thank you for letting us just feel the embrace of all those gratitudes that you brought to us. And I hope that you can feel the embrace of our gratitude to you right now. This was phenomenal. Your reading was phenomenal. You're inspiring. Your words are brilliant.
Thank you.
I feel really that it's a compelling call to action for the work that we do here at Montgomery College, promoting radical inclusion, countering racism throughout the communities that we belong to. I hope that there's time now for some Q&A, if you're still willing.
Please.
Great, thank you. We'll turn now to our Athenaeum faculty fellows, Professor Lee and Professor Miller, who will facilitate Q&A. Please post your questions for Ross either in the chat or into the Q&A panel that you should see at the bottom of your screen. Thank you, thank you.
Whew. So I'll just start. That was a powerful reading, and I'm still, coming down from it. It was just beautiful.
Thank you.
A question a lot of my students often have is, how do you find your authentic voice in your writing?
Mm.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I feel like there's one thing that kind of, for me, loosens that up a little bit is that we're made of many, many voices. And so I think we often have the idea that there's a singular voice that we have. But the truth is, at any given moment, there are always like, in that poem, I could cite 10 moments where, oh, I hear Amiri Baraka, or there goes Sonia Sanchez, or, oh, that was, there's Gerald Stern, my beloved teacher, or there's blah, blah, blah. And I think that's a real kind of liberating thing, I think, because I think so often we do imagine it's like this solitary, unified, discrete thing that you're trying to hold out the other voices. You're trying not to be like anyone. But as we know, like, the way you become a good singer is like you sing like Al Green for a little while. You learn how to sing like Al Green, and then you learn how to sing like, Terrence Trent D'Arby. These are the people I'm trying to sing like, or you learn how to sing like whatever, Roberta Flack, and then you learn how to sing like, Bono from U2 or something. And then the voice that you have is this kind of mixture of all these voices who have come before you. So I think, first of all, that takes some of that pressure off. And actually, just the other day, I was teaching a graduate workshop, and as a kind of exercise to help them trouble their own idea of their own voices, or maybe even the kind of familiarity with their own voice, which can make a voice a little bit predictable. A voice, kind of like a voice that you stop being interested in. Like if we start to imitate ourselves, I think. And so I had them, we gave each other all these weird constraints, but one of the things, it was like a 5-section poem they had to write, and they had to write every single one as an imitation of a poet who I kind of figured maybe they wouldn't have gotten, known. So it was, Muriel Rukeyser and Zbigniew Herbert and Mahmoud Darwish and Jean Valentine and maybe we, who else, whatever, a crew of writers, just to like shake it up, to be like, your voice is whatever you make of it. So that's one thing I want to say. The other thing that I think is really hard for people to get, is really hard for people to believe, there is a voice that we talk with. There is a voice that is a little bit like what we sound like. And not that that's always the thing that, I'm trying to aspire to in my own writing, but there is something really interesting about how I sound. There's like a kind of particularity to how we all sound. And I think we're often convinced that it's not particular, or it's not interesting, or most, heartbreakingly, that it's not beautiful. Like how we talk is not beautiful, but in fact, the way we talk, especially when we're talking to our friends and stuff, it's beautiful, And so there's a way that I would like encourage young folks or beginning writers or any writers, myself, I'll say it for myself. I encourage myself to really try to hear really clearly what I sound like, and try to drill to, which is not a thing that means I just write what I'm thinking at all. Just try to get like what you sound like on the page. It's an act of sort of creative precision that is as intense as anything you can imagine. Like because if you try to write something like you think you sound, most people, they'll write something that doesn't sound like anything like a person. And you're like, okay, so do you always speak in complete sentences? Is that how it is? Like, do you always, you always make perfect sense? Do you always, but to sort of try to get to some kind of thing that sounds like it might come out of your mouth. And also like it might come out of the mouth that you want to be speaking with too. So those are some things that I would say. it's like such a great question. It's like one of the hardest and one of the first questions, I think, for writers. On and on, my grad students are asking those same questions, and I'm always thinking about those questions. Like the book that I'm finishing right now, sorry, and I've been answering for a long time. I guess it's on my mind. That's a great question, I guess. But the book that I'm finishing now, I've been trying so hard to try to like figure out how can I represent or articulate a kind of mode of thinking that I do, which is a little bit, it's in evidence right now. Like something happens and I go, oh, like a kind of digressive, tangential, associative mode of thought. How can I formally do that? Because that's actually how I think. And it's actually how I talk. Like if we talk for long enough, just like you talk with most people, you'd be like, oh, that reminds me of, that time, whatever, that family reunion, or that, that time we went to the baseball game or something. And then you're on a whole nother thing. You're talking about your cousin, or you're talking about, whatever, the hot dogs at the stadium. And, I've been trying to but anyway, that mode of thought is also to me a mode of articulation, a mode of speech. And I've been trying to figure out what are the formal ways that I could do to kind of articulate that or to hold that. So this book has these very long footnotes. I mean, there's footnotes in here. It's like 5-6 pages long, It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. And I'll just tell you, for those of you who teach writing, I'm so sorry, like, because if this gets around, if someone reads this and likes it at all, and like some student, they're gonna be like, write these long ass footnotes. You're like, oh, come on, what is this? Anyway, I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I was noticing a comment from Catherine in the chat after reading, or in the process of reading, the Book of Delights. She said, your essays were a source of comfort at such an overwhelming and stressful time. And, I've been thinking about sort of the impact of your work on the reader. I've been listening to the Book of Delights on Audible, which you are reading, and it's just really incredible to have this like sort of soundtrack to my days, and to have this new way of looking at things. Like I definitely felt like it affected my outlook in a positive way, and I started to stop and notice things and take the time to do that. And I'm just curious if, as you're, talking about your own voice and how you develop your articulate your thoughts, are you also thinking about the audience or the reader, and what do you want them, how do you want the audience to, feel your work?
Yeah, great question. I'm enough of a kind of public writer, you could say now, that I'm always conscientious of a writer or of an audience. Like I have a sense of a reader because I write books, and now, at least for the time being, the books, will get published. So I'm cognizant of that. That being said, the very first audience for everything that I'm writing is myself. And I'm always like, I always start writing with a kind of question, and so those Delights, there was a kind of the premise of how that book was going to go. And it was basically, I was having a beautiful day one day, and like, in July or something, I was walking, I was at this artist retreat or something, I was at an artist retreat, and it was literally in a castle. It was just like really nice. I was having a very nice day, and there were like flowers and, birds, everything was great. And I was kind of like, this is wonderful. I'm going to write a little essay about how delightful this moment is. And then immediately one of those birds flew in my head and was like, do it every day for a year. And it was, when I say a bird flew, it was just such a guidance, do it every day for a year, see what that is. So I did it, and, so I wrote, I didn't do it every day for a year, but I got real close. I probably did 300 or 270 of them, and a lot, most of them were bad. And the thing that I found as I was starting to revise that book was that when the essays were interesting to me was when I really had a question, so if I wrote an essay about, there's one in there about high-fiving strangers, I love the high five from strangers, but then I'm like, well, why do you love public acts of affection, sort of like very consensual acts of public affection? If I knew the answer to that and wrote the essay from a place of knowledge, that would, for me, probably be a boring essay. I wouldn't be discovering myself in the process of writing it. But the essays in that book that are interesting to me are essays where I was like, well, why am I interested in that? Or why am I delighted by, the public, public bathrooms? Why am I delighted by public bathrooms? Not only the fact that they're nice, but like, why else? Why am I delighted by, putting coconut oil on my body and catching a sight of myself? Like, why am I? Which is, and I think the reason that those are interesting to me is because I'm way less interested in what I know than I am in what I don't know, and I'm way less interested in telling people what I know, writing what I know, than I am in witnessing myself changing as I think about something. So I was just like kind of working through an essay in my head, and I had this this essay about, being a coach and playing sports and like, just kind of the, stuff you kind of go through. And I was sort of in my head, I was like, I'm not interested. I was just talking about being a coach and being coached by, people who are trying, who could do better, who could do better. And I was sort of in my head, I was like, I'm not interested in convicting anyone. I'm interested in witnessing people change. That's what I'm interested in, and myself included. Although plenty of time I spend trying to convict myself, for sure. I'm trying to and that's also part of the thing. But what I'm really trying to be interested in is witnessing my changes and allowing myself to change. And so that's to say that I'm my first audience. I'm my truest audience, and it's also why when I wake up in the morning and I have something to write about, I go to it like, God, and I'm often writing about my life, I'm often just, those delights, they're all about stuff I'm like, God, I wonder what I'm going to learn, or this joy book that I'm writing, same thing. I'm like, I wonder what I'm going to learn about. I know I'm at the Aretha Franklin part, but I wonder what I'm going to learn about gratitude. Like, God, I wonder what's going to happen, and it can feel like mysterious, and it feels like, getting on a boat, and you don't know, are there rapids, and you don't know, are there eddies, and what are you going to get caught or tossed out of the boat? And I love it. And my trust and my faith is that if I witness my own transformation with a certain kind of precision and a certain kind of, like beauty, like how I've learned to write, if I witness that, in a certain kind of way, it might be interesting to other people. And it might also provide, and this is a thing I'm sort of coming to understand maybe lately, it might also provide a kind of witness for someone else's transformation. So if I'm able to witness my own changing, it might be the case that my writing is also able to witness someone else's changing. And that to me feels really moving, and so in a way, like these days, that's kind of what I think that's one of the things that I'm thinking about with audience. Like, as I'm witnessing myself in these essays, I know that I'm also, the work will be witnessing someone else, Thank you for that question.
Thank you. So please feel free to add questions in the chat or in the Q&A section.
Okay, so I'll just ask another question my creative writing students often ask. What's your process? I think you touched on it a bit. You write every day. So what else do you do to generate ideas and to balance, I guess, your joy and gratitude with topics that you want to address in your poems?
Yeah, yeah. I, my process, it's funny, like the older I get, the more my process, God, it's, one of the things that's funny, like I was thinking about, like I said, I'm kind of deep in the revisions of this book, and then listening to that poem, and then the piece that I read, I'm like, I love catalogs. I'm just like that list guy, like all the time, blah, 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 and my editor is very generous. She's like, okay, maybe like you want to cut this list down a little bit, because I don't think it's quite as thrilling to her as it is to me to like pile everything up. But I have a great editor, by the way. But I also these days, it's kind of funny, like I pile up book ideas, I just don't have any shortage of like things that I want to write about. And I know people who just don't know what they want to write about. I swear, like if we talked for like 10 minutes, I'd be like, oh, that's a book. Oh, that's a book. That's a book, and so, and I kind of line them up here. I'll write them down, like what are the ones that I want to do, So part of that's part of my process, to actually like, be kind of, I don't know, maybe the word's like fascinatable, like, there's like endless things that to me feel intriguing. I just, there's this project that I just got interested in. My brother, my Nana just died like a few weeks ago. She was 96 years old, she was 96. Long, life. She's the first of her siblings, that generation, to go. The oldest one's 99 and then down to 90. And, the one who's 99 is like, you probably beat me in a race, he's like that. But then the generation below, like my father's gone, my father's baby brother's gone, so 2 of the 3 brothers are gone. And there's just like this whole different kind of health thing that happened beneath them. These are people in Youngstown, Ohio, Black folks in Youngstown, Ohio, whose parents had migrated up from Port Gibson, Mississippi, and Osceola, Arkansas. The elders worked, they were teachers, or they worked in at the GM plant, except for my Nana. My Nana kind of, worked around in different ways. That to me is just like one of the most fascinating questions. It's just like that, like it sort of clicked. I was having a conversation and then I was like, wait, that's such an important book, and it just happens again and again. So in a certain kind of way, and this is a little bit with the voice thing too. Part of my process is trying to be intensely permeable, intensely affectable. Like I want to be moved by shit all the time, because when I'm moved by shit, then I'm like, what is that? Oh God, that's beautiful. What is that? Let me think about that. Which is a hard thing to do, because often we have to, or we're convinced that we have to, or maybe sometimes we have to sort of not be movable, But so I'll say that one of my process things is to be profoundly movable. The other thing that I'll say is that I try so hard to pay very close attention to the world. I try so hard. And I think I think it started as well, this isn't true. It's not either or, but it is part of my writing practice. It's part of my ethical and also part of my like sort of soul practice to just try to pay attention to and to witness what I find beautiful. But in terms of writing practice, I was visiting a class, high school kids at this high school in Philadelphia called Girard College. And I read a couple of the delights, and this one kid said, yeah, you sound like you have a really interesting life. And I said, I think it's probably no more interesting than yours. And I said, but I think I probably just describe my life better than you do. And and I feel like that's also part of my process, to have a kind of intense, descriptive relationship, observational and descriptive relationship to my life, to the extent that I can, and to constantly be practicing it, so that when the flowers do start to come up, or when they're just, right now, the grass is just starting to kind of come out from beneath the mulch and stuff, be noticing that. Like, be noticing when the bird's song is changing, and that means something. Or noticing how the light through the trees at, February 1st is significantly different than, like, it'll be March 1st, it's like the days are getting longer, like that's the light. That's the first thing. Like, the light is changing. That's the first thing, we gotta, that's like a practice. Like, notice the light. What's the light like today? Not that the way we always do, but it's just like the light's the first thing. And notice what your body's doing. How's your body feel? Like all these things. Like, notice what the birds are around you. Notice what the people you love laugh like. For all kinds of reasons. One is because it enriches your life. Two, because they're going to be gone. And what a gift to have them in your body like that. What a gift to have all of it in your body like that. So I'll just say that, which is not like processy, I love notebooks. I'm like crazy for pens. I have specific pens. Like, I always carry a notebook. Like, I'm always like taking notes. Like, sometimes I write in my hand, all that stuff. But I think, maybe the better advice would be like, just pay attention,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So we have a question from Samia. How do you overcome the fear of letting your voice out for others to hear?
Great question. I think maybe you just do it, I think maybe you just do it and see what happens. That might be it. I was sort of trying to, first I was like, my very first thing was like, I had an answer, like, yeah, it's okay. And then I had another answer, what was like, I had like 3 answers that I just shuffled through. But the answer that I think is actually maybe true is that you kind of practice doing it, and also, let me think. I think one thing, you practice doing it, and maybe you practice doing it by sharing in your writing what feels less alarming to you. I don't know that there's anything wrong with that. Like, if you write stuff that is like what we might call safe, and the stuff that feels a little bit more dangerous, I don't think there's probably anything wrong with first learning how to share what feels a little safer. I'm deeply in this right now, like I said, because I'm in these final revisions, and this book of essays is difficult. It's a really difficult book. Not entirely this joy book. It's very difficult, and it's and there's moments in there where I'm just like, I'm nervous. I'm nervous, and I feel like I couldn't have written this book before I wrote it. Like, I wasn't capable of actually saying out loud, literally, I literally, the essays, the process of writing the essays has sort of encouraged me to say certain things that I had never said out loud, which, to me, I kind of present as like a little bit of like an open and easy, but I'm like very shy, and I'm very kind of guarded, and I think part of the reason I write Delights every day is because I don't always, trust people. Like, I want to be movable because I know there's a part of me that's also like, don't move me. There's both of those things are true at once, and so to be able to sort of, learn how much I'm able to share, how much I want to share, in a way, because it's we got to take care of ourselves like that too. Like, there's stuff that it's like, it might be the case that there are things that we share that is like, that might, be a certain kind of labor or a certain kind of freight that we're going to be carrying. And there might be a time for that. And that time might be now, and that time might be later. So I know I was wandering a little bit, but I do think practice, I'll say like sort of what today is definitively. If we talk tomorrow, it might be different. Today, I would say a little practice. I'll also say in the company of who you love and who loves you. And be patient with yourself. That's what I'll say, Samia.
Thank you.
Okay, Fiona, do we have time for one more? Okay, this one's from Mary Moen. Could you share a few writers, essayists, poets, novelists from any period or country whom you love to read or who have influenced you?
Yeah. Maybe I'll stay with essayists for now. Well, and the poet Audre Lorde, her essays are some of the most important essays of my life. Particularly these two essays that one called "Poetry is Not a Luxury," and another called "The Uses of the Erotic," which is a long. I mean, it's not a long essay, but it's probably a 12-page essay maybe. And I just want to tell this great story about a great teacher from a great poet, Nikki Finney, who was my teacher at Cave Canem. Nikki Finney is an amazing poet who lives in South Carolina, teaches down there. But she was my teacher at this African-American poetry workshop, Cave Canem, which Katima and I have in common. And Nikki read before, I think, I can't remember how long the workshops were. They were either 2 or 3 hours, but whatever it was, she read for her day the entirety of this essay, it took her 40 minutes to read. And we didn't have a lot of time. First of all, that was one of the most important sort of pedagogical experiences I ever had in my life, where she was just like, we have a limited amount of time. I understand that. We're supposed to talk about your work. Most important thing right now for you is to know this essay. And you're going to sit there and I'm going to read it to you. First of all, so good, and the essay is just astonishing. It's just so beautiful. So, and then Poetry is Not a Luxury, that essay of Audre Lorde's is just also amazing. And it's a briefer essay, but just go read those essays. I want to say that. But read Audre Lorde, June Jordan's another poet and essayist whose work I love, and who's written so much. And I always feel lucky to be like, yeah, I've read quite a bit of June Jordan, but she's written so much. I'm going to be reading June Jordan, probably June Jordan my whole life, which feels really lucky. There's a writer named Hilton Alls, an essayist whose work I just adore. He has this one essay that's like 90 pages long, maybe, that I just read it and I can't get my head around it. It's so beautiful. There's a writer named Rebecca Solnit, whose work I really love. There's a writer named Patrick Rosal, poet and an essayist, and he has a book called Atang, and it's Atang, and then the kind of after the colon is an altar for listening to the beginning of the world. And it's actually a free downloadable book. You can just get it for free, and there's images and photographs, drawings, essays, poems. It's just one of the most astonishing books. There's a writer named Margot Jefferson, whose work I really love. There's a writer named Brian Blanchfield, an essayist kind of about my age, whose work I love. Maggie Nelson's another writer I really love. I could go on and on and on and on and on and on. But that's a nice list of essayists. And some of those people also, actually most of those people actually also write poems. So that's kind of cool.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, our time has come to close here. I'm personally so grateful for the time that we've had with Ross this evening. Thanks to all of you too for your great comments and questions in chat. Please join with me now, once again, in thanking Ross. This was just a phenomenally inspiring presentation. I appreciate everything you gave of yourself today.
Thank you. Yeah, grateful to be here with you.
Thank you. The recording is going to be posted at the Montgomery College Athenaeum webpage in a couple of weeks. Our next Athenaeum event is exactly a month from now, Tuesday, 22 March. And Ms. Rachel Floor, Executive Director of the JFK Presidential Library Foundation, will interview Dr. Frederick Logoval, Professor of History at Harvard University. I hope you can join us then. Thank you, Ross, and thank you to our audience. Good night.